Dear church, let's talk about lessons learned from COVID-19. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley. I've got my good friend, special guest, Sam Dominguez. We can't even call you special guest anymore. You're on so much.
It's been a while, though.
Yeah,
I'm not going to remember.
We gave you a sabbatical because we felt like we were having you all the time, you and your dad, but always appreciate your perspective and being on here.
Thank you.
And I think this is a good time to kind of talk about some of the lessons that we've learned from this whole pandemic, because I think if we don't pay attention and we don't learn something, we've missed an opportunity, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah. I don't want to be one of those people who's constantly harping on, well, we have to find a silver lining to every kind of problem that we have. That can be very difficult for people for whom this has been a very tragic occurrence or a very difficult time in their lives. And not all of us have been affected to the same levels. But anytime we do have a difficult situation like this, I think it's important that we look at it and say, well, can I learn anything productive? Can I learn anything? Did this reveal anything about me that I can then improve? But not just in terms of our physical lives or just our secular lives, but did this teach me anything spiritually that I can carry with me that I don't want to forget when things go back to whatever normal is going to be?
Yeah. I was on a webinar the other day with the Jenkins Institute, and they asked, do you have any suggestions for preachers and sermons when we get back together and all that? And I said, well, I'm not really on the one to be giving advice, but I said, I can tell you what we're going to do. When we all get back together in a normal church service, I'm going to preach on it one time and we're done. Because I don't think we need a year's worth of sermons on what we've learned from COVID-19. I think people are sick of talking about it. They're sick of dealing with it. And like you said, some have dealt with it more so than others. And I think we're just all tired of it. But I do think that it provides an opportunity. Any kind of adversity exposes us, right?
Right.
So when we face adversity, it exposes us whether for good or for bad. And so just kind of tell me what you kind of see when you look at the landscape of this pandemic. Have we learned some good things? Have we responded properly in some cases? I know I have my opinion.
So. Well, I don't necessarily want to make a judgment as to whether we've all responded properly or to the best that we can. But I think it definitely has revealed certain things about us and about where our dependencies have been, really, because I think it really started to impact people seriously when they were no longer able to meet together with the congregation.
Right.
And when you are no longer meeting with that church family, well, first of all, you suddenly realize that you love and you miss these people.
Right.
And, and maybe the opposite was true. Maybe you suddenly realize, wow, I don't have any connections with these people at all. And that reveals a problem in and of itself.
That's right.
But, most of us, I think, we started missing people. We started recognizing how important the assembly really is to us. And we started thinking about it in a little bit of different terms of, oh, this isn't just something I do because I have to. Right. This is obviously something God designed for my benefit and for my good, for my spiritual good and my physical good. Right. But at the same time, I think it revealed that in a lot of ways, we have allowed ourselves to become dependent upon the congregation or upon the leadership in the congregation for providing large aspects of our spirituality, large aspects of our devotion. I know that I spoke to people through text messaging and whatnot, and my wife did as well when this first started. And people were saying things like, I realized how little I pray on my own. I realized how poor my personal prayer life was because I wanted to gather together and pray with other people, and I wanted a church leader to conduct a prayer for me, and realize that I just didn't pray that much on my own, or to realize I don't know how to self-motivate to Bible study or to self-motivate to devotional time.
I was getting all of it at church, and now that stopped.
Yeah, I never had to think about what do I want to look at in God's Word because, I could take a very good route, which is I can just follow what Chris is doing, or I could follow what we were doing in Bible class. And it's not that the church doing these things or providing these things for us is bad. It's certainly not bad.
Right.
But it sometimes can reveal that, well, I haven't been doing any of this effort on my own, and I have kind of lost the technique. I've lost the training to be able to look at God's Word and say, well, there's something in here that's going to help me through this. There's something in here that's going to remind me that God is in control, or remind me about how I need to behave and how I need to treat other people. but I don't know how to find it, and
Yeah,
I don't know where to go.
We've kind of lost this self-reliance. We've relied on the church to provide for our every spiritual need. And like you said, I mean, the church provides a spiritual feast every Sunday and Wednesday, and we need to take advantage of that. But that's still a very small portion of your spiritual livelihood that's affected. It's an important part of it, like you said. But I think what this has done is it's exposed some of us to, maybe we're not as equipped to deal with this on our own as we should be. I've often said that we tend to categorize everything in life. If you look at it like fruit, we tend to look at our lives like an orange, and an orange comes in sections, and you take a section off and you eat each section. So you've got a church section, you've got a school section or a work section and all that, when actually our livelihood is more like a peach, where you've got the pit in the center, which is God, and everything is encased around God. And instead of compartmentalizing it, God is at the center and everything is encased around it. And I think we tend to compartmentalize church like we do everything else. That's a Sunday, maybe Wednesday thing if I get around to it. And that's it. And you and I talked about this this weekend, just texting each other about how, many of us became, we realized that we were pretty ill-equipped to handle this from every other perspective too. We had to learn how to do school online. We had to learn how to do work, online. How
to teach our kids.
We had to learn how to do a Zoom meeting, all those different things. And I think very much true from a spiritual perspective.
It makes sense that I was not equipped to work from home because that was never a requirement. That was never a necessity for what I needed to do.
Absolutely.
And so, we went through the mad scramble of how are we going to set up a VPN and make sure I can dial in and then find out if my internet can even support it. And you go through all those hassles. But that didn't reveal to me something of, oh, man, I've been letting my office down by not being ready to go to do this, because that was never the expectation.
Right.
But I think we have incorrectly surmised that the church was doing that for us, and that, I don't need to know how to study God's word on my own because, that's why Chris is there, or
that's why we pay him.
Yeah, that's why. I don't need to know how to shepherd myself and help guide myself to God, or how to cling to that relationship on my own without help. Because, that's why God made us go to church. That's why he put all these people in leadership positions to do all these things for me. Instead of recognizing, as you've been talking about for the past several weeks in your sermons, this is about relationship.
Yeah.
It is about our relationship with God. And while we have a family relationship, your relationship is still personal.
Absolutely.
It is still personal. My children have a unique and personal relationship with me as their father, but then they also have a collective familial relationship with me as their father. And a lot of times we have abandoned that personal relationship.
Sure.
We have abandoned that personal connection to God and just said, the shepherds are supposed to be watching out for me, so I'm going to let them do that. Chris is supposed to be guiding me through the word, so I'm just going to let him do that.
Sure.
And obviously, not all of us have taken a cavalier attitude about it. And not all of us have been doing this thing even deliberately, because, that's something that I would like us as the church and as church leadership to think about and say, how can we continue to go about having corporate worship, having the family come together, and make sure people understand? We say it all the time, hey, this is not supposed to be a replacement for your own study, but man, it's really hard not to let it be and to kind of make it be, because we're saying, hey, I want you to think about this all week, and I want you to come to class next week ready to study my Bible class, and we kind of put people in a position where, this needs to be your primary study, and just through no fault of anybody's own, it's just we've atrophied these muscles.
Yeah.
These personal muscles that we're supposed to be exercising to maintain that relationship with God, we've just let them go soft.
Yeah, we have. When God created Adam, when he made his creation, he said it was good. When he created Adam, he said it was very good. But there was one thing that wasn't very good. In fact, there was one thing that was really not good, and the fact that he was alone. And so God did something about the problem of loneliness, and he has all the way through Scripture. With Moses and Aaron, and with David and Jonathan, he's constantly addressed loneliness. And the biggest, at least in my opinion, the biggest way we see he addressed loneliness in the Bible is with the church. Christianity was never intended to be practiced in isolation, and it was never intended to be on an island by ourselves. It was intended to be corporate, together, communal relationship, as you said. And I think we've realized that as much as anything in this. Now, there are some that are more introverted. They're loving this probably, And I got to say, there are some things about this that I have really enjoyed because we do two services that are concurrent, and meaning they happen at the same time. They're just reversed. So I preach in one, run down the hall, and preach at the other. I don't get to worship with my family, and I've gotten to worship with my family in my pajamas. Now. I don't watch me. That's just weird, So, but that's another benefit that's been of this.
You've been missing some great lessons.
Well, I'm kind of like when an artist or a songwriter or a performer performs so many concerts, they get sick of that song. I kind of get sick of the sermon by the time I've delivered it on TV, and So, but that's been a benefit too, is I can watch. We can tune into our service, and then after communion, instead of watching me, we can watch somebody else, and you can tune into several different church services. That's been nice. So there are some benefits here. One of the other benefits that I've seen is, our church family, our elders have encouraged Oldham Lane to now meet together in small groups until we come back together. And I think that's been great. I know many of our young adults, some of our older members have gotten together and in a small group. Families have gotten together, 15 or 20 have gotten together to watch the online service, kind of back to the first century, meeting in homes, realizing that the way we do it every Sunday doesn't have to be the way we do it every Sunday.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of more flexibility there.
Absolutely.
Than I think we're used to, and we kind of get set into our ways. And it has been very nice to be able to just worship with a small set of your family.
Yeah.
We did go through several weeks where it was just me, the wife, and the kids sitting in our living room. But even that was very beneficial because there's no hiding.
Right.
There's no sitting there, and just kind of blending into the crowd.
Sure.
When you're in such a small group, when you're in such a tight-knit group,
Yeah.
If I want my children to understand that singing praises to God isn't something I do because I'm having to or I'm told
Right.
to, and it's a requirement, and if I don't do it, then God's going to be unhappy. So no, these are praises that just come pouring out of my heart in recognition for who God is because of the gratitude in my heart. Well, it's going to be pretty obvious if that's not true.
Exactly.
When I can't hide behind 600 some odd other people who are
Right.
singing,
Right.
And I really hope that people have taken the opportunity to see, if I may not feel like I sing well, I may not sing like my voice is pleasant to listen to. Well, I hope that in these circumstances, we've realized that it only matters what God is listening to.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter how I sound to somebody else. And realizing that if you're sitting in that small group, in that family, and you're singing praises, your voice missing matters.
Yeah, we've talked about that, as we discuss coming back together. I mean, anything and everything's on the table. What precautions do we take to ensure the safety of our members as we come together? Because, there's so much unknown about this pandemic, about this virus. That's why they call it a novel virus. I had Dr. Longley on the podcast last week, and that's what he was saying. He may have even said it afterwards, but he said, science is about observable facts. And typically what happens in the lab gets reported to us. We're the lab. We're looking at it and we're seeing it happen as it happens. And that's a hard thing. But so when we talk about coming together, we've talked about anything and everything, how to take communion, how to give contribution, how to, singing, because singing is, the medical professionals are telling us is enhances the spread of this virus possibly because it's droplets and all that. So do you sing with a mask? That's been discussed. And one of our elders said, God knows what we're singing. He knows our heart. Because it was mentioned, well, that's not going to sound good. No, probably not. But, what is most important here? And I think those are some of the lessons we talk about that have been learned from this is that, I know when we sit on the couch and watch worship, we sing along, but it's not pretty. We kind of need those other 700 voices drowning us out.
But you see, that's exactly the kind of mindset that I hope people can realize is wrong while they're sitting there. Mm-hmm. Because when I'm sitting and I'm singing, and my children and my wife are singing, and my father and mother and my aunt and uncle, and we're all in a big living room together, and we're all singing together, you start hearing it the way God hears it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point.
You know, I mean, sitting on the couch and, you know, my daughter is 6 years old, but she can read enough that she can follow along a song. And of course, she has heard many of these songs many, many times. And so she knows large chunks of several of the songs.
Yes.
And so she will sing along. Well, of course, she can't modulate her voice, and she doesn't know what the music is or this or that or the other. Or my son is hitting that point where he can't really control what his voice is doing anyway, you know? And as a father, when you sit and you listen to them sing, that gives you that little bit of insight. This is how God's listening to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, this is why it doesn't matter whether I can carry a tune in a bucket.
Right.
This is why it is the gratitude of my heart that he's hearing through this song. Right. That's why I suddenly realized my voice matters. It doesn't matter if there's no one else in the room or if there's 700 people in the room. My voice matters. Why? Because I am expressing my praise and my gratitude to God. It's the same type of thing when we're praying together. It's so easy to just sit there and not be doing anything. Well, because the guy at the microphone, he's the one doing the praying.
Right.
And then you're at home and you're stuck and you think, I don't know how to lead a prayer. Yeah. I don't know how to pray when someone is listening to me. I don't know how to pray by myself in my own head. I end up having my brain run all over the place. And you start recognizing, you know, my concentration, my focus, my prayer joined with who's leading matters.
Yeah.
I need to be a part of this. You know, I loved what you talked about with God addressing loneliness with the congregation, because I've had a thought that's rattled in the back of my head. I don't even know that I've brought it up to you, so why not just do it on the spot, right?
Absolutely.
I've had a thought rattling in my head for a long time now of the idea of big churches but lonely Christians. Because we have a large, healthy congregation at Oldham Lane, and yet there are still lonely Christians in that body.
Right.
Because it is so easy to feel like you don't matter as part of that. You're just a cog in the wheel, you know? At work, I have a poster on the wall, and it shows a small cog between two big cogs, and it says, just because you're a vital part doesn't mean you're not infinitely replaceable. And it shows a pile of worn-out cogs on the ground below it. And it's just one of those ideas of just don't get caught up thinking that no one else can do what you do.
Exactly.
But that's at work.
Yeah.
When we talk about the church family, and you look at an individual and say, no, you are irreplaceable.
Sure.
Now, you are not just a number on a roll here. You are not just a voice lost among so many others. Yeah. You are another soul in this family, and that matters to God. If you leave and a different person comes in, that's not like swapping out a cog in a machine. There is still a lost sheep out there.
Yeah.
And I hope people can realize through this time that may have heightened their sense of isolation. It might have heightened their sense of loneliness, to be able to come back into the body and recognize, I have a place here. I am an important part of this congregation.
Yeah,
I don't have to be Chris to be an important part of this congregation. Sure. I don't have to be an elder. I don't have to be a Bible class teacher, but I do need to be an active spiritual participant in this congregation. You know, we ask, well, if we're going to keep doing Bible classes and Chris is going to keep preaching, why do I need to know how to study this word on my own? Why would I study anything beyond what they're telling me to study or asking me to study? Yeah. Well, so that when I come into the body and I have an opportunity, I can contribute.
Yeah.
I can look at Chris and listen to what he's saying and say, I get what he's talking about. I might even be able to talk to you afterward and say, you know what? I was thinking something similar and I was reading over here. You know, it's not like any of these things, especially if you've been a minister for a long time. There's going to be very few things in God's word that you haven't looked at least a few times.
Exactly.
But then when you're sitting and listening to someone else talk, you're listening to a new Christian analyzing the word, sometimes even then I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
And we get to grow spiritually. It's what Paul's saying, you know, I get to be edified by your faith, you get to be edified by my faith. You know, and he's saying that to young, new Christians that he's never met. He says, but I, Paul the Apostle, want to be edified by your faith. I hope we can recognize that we may not have been taking advantage of that before.
Yeah, because it's it's like a college class. You know, you take an introductory biology class or something, a weed out class your freshman year in college. You're a Social Security number. You're the last 4 digits of your Social Security number. Professor doesn't know who you are, doesn't even know if you're there unless, he sees your number.
Unless you're a problem.
Exactly, unless you're a problem. But, church is different. I mean, I may feel like I'm falling through the cracks. I may feel like I'm isolated. I'm sitting back here and nobody cares about me. But the very number of hair on your head are counted. I mean, God knows. He knows you, and He knows you intimately, and He's acquainted with you. And so I think what you said is very profound, because when we come back together, hopefully we realize that we all have a part in this. We all have something to contribute. We say this a lot. I can't wait till things get back to normal, but is that really what we want? Do we really want to be back to normal? Because back to normal probably means we didn't really learn anything. So how much normal do we want to get back to is really the way I would put it. In fact, that gives you a little snippet of my sermon when we come back together. How much normal do we want to get back to? What do we want to keep from quarantine and sheltering at home that will help us in all this?
It's going to be really interesting, because there are a whole lot of people that I don't think they have any idea how much I miss them.
Yeah.
Because why would they? And the question is going to be, when I see them again, am I going to express that to them? Mm-hmm. There's a difference. You were talking about it just in your sermon last night, talking about appreciating people, but then you got to tell them that you appreciate them. Because I can appreciate someone, and I can love and cherish that someone is a part of my church family, and never go express to them how I feel about them, how I care about them. Yeah. An important ministry to me in the church is ensuring that our older Christians have relationships, have friends, have people to talk to come and visit them and make sure that they're doing okay.
Sure.
Because as you get into that stage of your life, it's just very natural that your social group becomes smaller, more strained, more difficult to get together with.
Yeah.
And especially as a I was about to say a young Christian, but I don't qualify as that anymore. A youngish Christian. I've got way too much gray in my beard to say that.
Changing daily.
Yeah, right. But as a younger Christian, to be able to go to them and say, I appreciate having your wisdom here, having your experience here, having your spiritual friendship is important to me, and it matters to me. And so if going back to normal is me going back to sitting in the congregation, looking across the room and saying, man, I'm really glad he's here. Man, I'm really glad she's here. But not going over to them and hugging them when we're allowed to and saying, I appreciate you. I love you. I am so glad that you're here. I want to have this Christian spiritual relationship with you. Why? Because I'm edified by your faith.
Yes.
You bring me closer to God. Being able to have this family relationship with you brings me closer to God. The same thing with the young people. You look at the youth group, or you look at the children's classes. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to just see them as a motley crew running around. Mm-hmm. Or then you look at the youth group and you think, there's some really good kids over there. They're really getting on their way toward having this kind of relationship with God. Well, am I going and telling them that?
Right. Am
I going and talking to them? Am I letting them know that they're important to me, and that I care about them being here, and that I care about their spiritual future? So, I'm not your parent. I'm not directly responsible for you, but it's going to hurt me if you don't have this relationship with God.
Right.
Are we going to go back to the normal to where we don't express these things to each other? And to where there might be a lonely Christian in a big congregation?
Right.
Or is it going to be, Oldham Lane's already been great for when do you turn off the lights because everybody's still talking?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I think it should get even worse. It should get even worse. We never know when to turn off the lights because we can't get enough of each other, and we can't get enough of sharing with each other how important we are to each other in this family. I hope I never go back to the normal where I'm not telling people that.
I agree with that. And I think that I have two opinions here. One is...
Just two?
Yeah, just with this particular topic. I think when we get back together, it's going to be better than ever. I do. That's my opinion. But I believe when we come back together on June the 7th, and then as we continue to loosen the restrictions, it's going to be better than ever. Because, when we first get back together, we're going to do some things that defy everything we believe in, which is stay apart.
Right.
6 feet or more. Don't hang around in fellowship afterwards. Actually, we're going to kind of encourage people to go outside because right now that's the best place to be.
Right.
Stay 6 feet apart outside and be out there. But social distancing is absolutely off our radar when it comes to the church. We don't want to social distance. That's the worst thing we can do. But because of what we're dealing with, there are some matters. I think about this. We always tell people, scoot in, and scoot up.
Yeah.
Now we're going to be telling people scoot back and spread out, which is exactly the opposite message of what we like to give. So I think as, June the 7th, when we come back together, it's going to be different. But as time goes on and we can finally get all back together as one body without the restrictions, it's going to be better than ever. But here's my second opinion. In just a couple of months, it'll go right back to the way it was. You will fall into the same routine. It won't take us long to remember what it was like before. And that's just my opinion. I hope I'm wrong on that. And I don't think just Oldham Lane. I think every church, because the reason I say that is because I know me. And I know human beings.
Right.
And we find it really easy to fall right back into a routine. So we're going to have to fight for something here if we're going to come back to normal and keep some things that we got from sheltering at home and quarantining and all that. We're going to have to fight for some of that.
That's why it's important that we're talking about it. That's why it's important that we're thinking about these things. I mean, I hope anybody who listens to this or watches this will take some time and think about it and say, well, is there something that I want to be different? Because if you're going to want it to be different, you're going to have to work at it. You're going to have to deliberately say, I don't ever want to find out that I don't know how to pray or that I'm not comfortable praying. I don't ever want to find out that I'm lost in God's word.
Sure.
I want to make sure that that never happens to me again. Well, you're going to have to put in the effort to do that.
Yeah.
But as we go through this difficult transition, though, it's really going to be easy to forget certain aspects of our Christian relationships in favor of others, because a big part of our Christian relationships is the closeness, is the family. Come here, I want to give you a hug. I want to be close to you and all that. And like you said, we can't do that right now. That isn't a good idea right now. And I'm not going to tell anybody that they should do that, because you shouldn't. It is not a good idea right now.
Sure.
But a lot of times we get frustrated by that. I was talking to some other friends of mine in ministry, and my friend said, I just want to go up to somebody and say, I don't care, just come here, I'm giving you a hug.
Right.
And I said, I know what that feels like. Believe me, I know what that feels like. Yeah. But I have to be reminded that my concern for that person, their well-being, has to supersede my own need for their closeness.
Yeah, and let me stop you right there, because that is something that is really our perspective is going to have to be different when we come back together. Because one thing that I have noticed that's a little disheartening with being apart, being stuck at home perhaps, and having a lot more time on social media is a lot of
that's never a
good thing. Twitter is running our world. Facebook is good to a point, but what I've noticed is a lot of Christians even they're filling in gaps, because this is a novel virus, because the information changes daily, because we don't really know what works, what doesn't, and we're kind of fixing the airplane while we're flying it. People fill in the gaps. And there's all sorts of conspiracy theories that this has become a political virus, and it's become partisan like everything else. It has drawn lines just like everything else in our culture. And, even to the point where you see a line drawn with masks or with, personal safety and all that. And you see these memes and things, presenting their case and talking about they're standing firm and they're not going to let the man or the government bring them down. And at the end of the day, none of that matters when it comes to us getting back together as a church. What matters is how can we ensure the safety of our people? And, we've talked about this in our committee to get back together, is that we don't care about the politics of this. We don't care one bit what your conspiracy theory is. What we care about is how do we protect our most vulnerable? How do we keep people from hopefully not getting sick? Because when all is said and done, you boil it all down, here's what we do know. It is a highly contagious virus, and it's easily passed. So we, and the mortality rate is not that big, but if you have an underlying condition or something, that can enhance this taking over your body and causing you real difficulty or even death, we want to try to prevent that as much as possible. So, I think that's something else to keep in mind as Christians is, as we're coming back together, but even before we come back together, hey, we need to stop with all this stuff, and I mean, we can have our opinions about this. And, that's one thing we said with the committee as well is I don't care what the opinions are about, the politics of it and all that, because they're all opinions. So therefore, my default opinion, if you want, is going to be with the health officials and the people that we are relying on to say, hey, what do we need to do?
It's like so many other aspects of our Christian life. We let the world define for us how we apply our Christian ideals.
I agree.
We let them muscle in and tell us, well, the government's telling you to wear this mask and it's embarrassing and it makes you look silly and they can't tell me what to do. And you know what? Well, God tells me I need to love my neighbor anyway, so I'm not going to do this and I'm just going to,
Sure.
And when you step back from that, when you get your pride, you get your emotions pulled back from that, and you look at those kind of responses that we're making on social media and even in person, there's a whole lot of pride built up into that.
There is.
There's a whole lot of, I'm not willing to do anything for you, is what it amounts to. It needs to be good for me. I'm not willing to be uncomfortable. I'm not willing to do this unnecessary thing or this necessary thing because you don't know which it is. You probably should guess that it's necessary, but I'm not willing to do this. That's not the way that Christians interact in the Scripture. When we were just having a class before all of this started in the epistles, and one of the most simple points that Paul makes when he's talking to Christians who are having difficulty with each other, they're taking each other to court, they're having all these problems, and he's just saying, how can you not be solving this on your own? Yeah. Why would you be going and having to deal with this out before the Gentiles, is what he says. But then despite all of that, you should be able to deal with it on your own. You shouldn't be treating each other, in the most ideal situation. But in the end, his closing thought on it is, well, wouldn't you just rather be wronged?
Yeah, right.
He's like, well, your fellow Christian is not behaving properly. He's abusing you. He's taking advantage. Whatever. All of these things all the potential responses to the Apostle Paul.
Sure.
And he says, yeah, but wouldn't you just rather be wronged than do something that is not Christ-like?
Yeah.
And to me, that one is just a weight on my shoulders that I can't shake loose because in so many things it's no, I wouldn't rather be wronged. I want fairness. I want everything to be balanced. I don't want to have to take on a burden that someone else doesn't have to do. Right. And in the end, if the masks help, we need to be wearing them. If you believe that this is all some cockamamie theory and it's all some conspiracy to shut us all down and you don't want to do that, you still wear it if it will help your brother.
Yeah.
Or if it will make them feel more comfortable.
And we might find out at the end of all this, you were right. It was a huge conspiracy. I don't know. Maybe. But at the end of the day,
so what?
But at the end of the day, we have the information that we have, and that's it. And unfortunately, it's information that's constantly changing, and we don't really know what to believe and what not to believe. And, and I will say this too. I've heard too many Christians talk about, the first church and how they didn't let the government keep them from meeting, and they face persecution, and that's a completely, let's just say that's a complete apples to oranges comparison, because we're not talking now. If you want to say, like Dr. Longley did Monday, that you're assuming risk in both situations, that was the point he was making. I think that's a good point. You're always assuming risk when you come back together from a pandemic or when you're the first century church, but to compare the plight of first century Christians to the plight we're facing today is absolutely not a good analogy. Yeah. Because,
refusing to wear a mask isn't the same as walking into the lion's den.
No, that's not the same.
Let's just make it clear, we're not making those kind of sacrifices.
Exactly. And when you talk about, not assembling, we never took our cue from, necessarily the government. I mean, we listened and we tried to follow those guidelines, but I mean, we made the decision not to assemble mainly because we wanted to keep our people safe.
Right.
And what you know about the church, anybody who is a minister or attends church knows that oftentimes the people who are your best attenders are the people who probably shouldn't always be there. The most vulnerable typically are also the ones who are the most present, and so you got to protect them. You've got to help them, and so we want to do that, and I think that's at the end of the day. Do you care about your people?
Yes, and in the end, these things are minor inconveniences.
They are.
To those of us for whom
and temporary measures,
measures and minor inconveniences, and are we truly going to say that minor inconvenience is more important to me than keeping my brethren safe, keeping my brother safe who is going to be in that vulnerable position. And in the end, it's not just the elderly, the young can be impacted by this. The just healthy people can otherwise be impacted. It causes all manner of other problems. Right. As we get caught up in all of this, it is so easy to just treat everything like it's a bunch of numbers, But there's a newspaper front page, New York Times, that's just going to be a list of all the names of people who died.
Yeah.
And it's in small little bitty type, and it fills the entire page from top to bottom.
Yeah.
And those are real people,
Souls.
Souls. Mm-hmm. Many of them Christians.
Yeah.
And some of them not.
Yeah.
Some of them people who were lost and didn't get reached.
Yeah.
And when we look back through history, there have been lots of incidents of these kind of things happening. There have been plagues, there have been disease, there have been disasters where great multitudes of people have died. Mm-hmm. That is unfortunately a reality of living in a world that fell away from what God wanted it to be, what He designed it to be,
right.
Because we decided not to be what God wanted us to be.
Sure.
We can bring the good news out of that.
Mm-hmm.
We can bring the good news to people. But if we're going to approach it with an attitude of, well, my personal rights and my personal feelings are more important to me than your health and well-being,
mm-hmm.
then it's a real big stretch to go to that same person, oh, but your soul matters to me.
Yeah, right.
We have to recognize that the way the Scripture talks to us about being Christians, being Christ-like, well, what did He do?
Yeah, exactly.
He laid down His life for us.
Exactly.
He died to save us. He died, and then while He was dying, He prayed for the people who were killing Him.
Yeah.
Why do we want to be people who aren't Christ-like? Let's just focus on that. Get all the politics out of it. Mm-hmm. Get any concerns. Get your pride out of it. Just don't think about anything other than
being Christ-like.
Being Christ-like.
Yeah.
I mean, that's advice for every day, right? I mean,
absolutely.
That's advice for everything that we do. But if we focus on it that way, then it's really going to be, I'm not going to let the lessons learned here go away.
Yeah.
If I'm focused on being Christ-like. I'm not going to let my brethren go another day without understanding how important they are to me and how they fit into this congregation. I'm not going to let my minister go another day without recognizing how important his work is to me, how he benefits me. I'm not going to let my shepherds go without being able to say to them, I appreciate the love and concern that's going on here. I mean, this may not even be the best format to bring this up, but I had a discussion with a friend of mine who's a preacher, and he was struggling with everything that's been going on.
Sure.
He's been struggling with having to do the same thing that you have, where preaching to an empty room.
Yeah.
And he felt, and I don't want to shortchange his feelings, but he felt like he shouldn't be having as hard a time as he was. Mm-hmm. And he's needing to lead people. He's needing to help people and show people, and yet he was struggling so mightily with it. And sometimes not having any idea what else to say, God and the Spirit can sometimes just help you, hey, this is actually what he needs to hear. And I just said, well, it makes sense to me that you feel this way because you have the concern of the church on your shoulders.
Sure.
It's the Apostle Paul again. He says, on top of all these things, I have the concern of the church.
Daily concern,
on my shoulders. And it's like, well, yeah, you're going to feel that way.
Sure.
And that's okay. He didn't say I shouldn't feel this way. Absolutely. He didn't say, God help me not to feel this way. He just said, yeah, I'm an apostle in the Lord's church. I feel this way.
Exactly.
I feel that concern. And I hope that everyone, while we're staying at home, while we're gearing up to try and hopefully get everything back to a new normal, a better normal, that we can also remember the church leadership, our ministers, our fellow brethren. They carry burdens that we don't even know about. Yeah. They carry concerns for the church that we don't even know about. And during this time, that concern has been magnified to a degree that we can't even imagine.
I sympathize with his sentiments. Yeah,
and
for sure.
And to just, I would just ask anybody who hears this to pray for your ministers, pray for your elders, pray for those who teach Bible class, pray for everyone in your congregation, because there are spiritual feelings, there are weights on their shoulders that you can't even imagine, that you're not even aware of. Yeah. And by looking at that, sometimes it can help you feel less burdened in your own concerns.
Yeah.
It can help you realize we are all in this together. There is someone who cares mightily about my condition during all of this. And then when we do come back together, it's not going to be back to the same old thing. It's going to be the new normal. It's going to be I'm not going to let a moment go by. I'm not going to be caught flat-footed again spiritually.
Right.
We're going to have physical things like this happen again. We might even have political issues happen again.
We might. Yeah.
But if we take the lessons that we've learned and we make that new normal, it's not going to have the same impact.
I agree. We have a great opportunity here to hit the restart button. You know, we get to reboot the system. And when we start over, let's make sure that we started in the right way and start off on the right foot, and don't get ourselves in a bind from the very beginning by focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah.
Sam, thank you so much, man, for joining me.
Thanks,
again.
Chris.
We'll have you back. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We want to let you know that you can email your questions or comments to chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. If you have a specific question for Sam, we'll make sure he gets it, and we would love to hear from you. Also, share about the podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and of course, right here on Facebook. And we appreciate you so much tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.